Okay, so you've got this book made to stick, and you're ready to dive in, right? We're going to break down why some ideas just stick with you, like they're coated in cognitive Velcro or something.
It's true. And the book starts off with this really interesting comparison. On the one hand, you've got that urban legend, the kidney heist. You know that one?
Oh gosh, the one where you wake up in an ice bath? Totally. Gives me the chills every time. It's crazy how these weird stories stick with us.
All right. It's terrifying, but you can't forget it. Now, contrast that with, say, a dry financial report from a charity. Night and day in terms of memorability. And that's the core question the book tackles.
Mhm.
Why do some ideas stick while others just vanish? One of the big things they emphasize is figure out the core of your idea.
So it's like boiling it down to its essence, kind of like a headline.
Exactly. They actually say, imagine you had to sum up your entire idea in one sentence. What would it be? That's your core message. But it's not just about being shocking or weird. The book also gets into some really practical examples, like the campaign by the Center for Science and the public interest against movie popcorn.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. Wasn't it something about how much fat is in a single serving?
Exactly. But they didn't just tell you it was unhealthy, they showed it. Laid out an entire table of greasy food like a mountain of bacon, burgers, the works.
Oh, man, I remember that image. It was like a heart attack on a table.
And they said, this is what you get when you eat one bag of movie popcorn. One bag.
That's much more effective than just saying popcorn is bad for you.
Right. And to top it off, they hit you with this crazy statistic. More saturated fat than a whole day of eating all that other junk.
So it's about making it visual, making it concrete, and hitting them with those hard facts.
Absolutely. It's not just about repeating your message, it's about making it stick. And that's where they introduce the success framework, 6 principles that can make any idea unforgettable.
Okay, so what are these 6 magic principles? Give us the inside scoop.
Well, they discovered something really interesting while researching the book. Even in creative fields like advertising, there's a surprising amount of structure behind what works. They analyzed tons of award-winning ads and found that almost 90% of them use just 6 basic templates.
Wow. So there's a formula even for creativity. That's wild. So what are these 6 principles that have Madison Avenue buzzing?
The 6 principles are simplicity, unexpectedness, concreteness, credibility, emotions, and stories.
Okay. Sounds pretty straightforward. But something tells me there's more to it than meets the eye.
Oh, you better believe it. Each of these principles is packed with nuance. And that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. So we're diving into the success framework right. We want to make those ideas stick like glue. First up, simplicity. And this isn't just about dumbing things down. It's about finding the core of your idea. The book calls it the commander's intent, like something you'd hear in the military.
Commander's intent. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
So basically, it's a super clear statement that sums up the ultimate goal. Think of it like this. Southwest Airlines. Their commander's intent is, we are the low-fare airline.
Makes sense. Simple and to the point?
Right. Every decision they make goes through that lens. Routes they fly, snacks, or lack thereof, even hiring.
They're definitely not handing out free first-class upgrades. It all comes back to that core idea.
Exactly. And this doesn't just apply to airlines. Think about Bill Clinton's campaign slogan back in '92. It's the economy, stupid.
Oh yeah, that was everywhere.
It cut through all the political noise and boiled everything down to the one thing people cared about most.
So how do you apply that to more complex ideas? Not every idea is as simple as low fares.
That's where things get tricky. It's about finding the core message, distilling it down to its essence. They call it profound compactness, packing a punch in just a few words, like JFK's Man on the Moon speech.
Okay, profound compactness. I like the sound of that. And you're right, that speech was incredibly powerful.
Right. It was simple, concrete, and it tapped into something bigger. It wasn't just about space exploration. It was about human potential.
Amazing how a few well-chosen words can do that. So we've got to tap into something deeper. But how?
Well, the book talks about these things called schemas. They're like mental models we build based on what we already know.
Okay, so it's about connecting with what the audience already understands.
Exactly. Imagine trying to describe a pomelo to someone who's never seen one. If you say it's a citrus fruit, it's not very memorable, right? But if you say it's like a giant grapefruit, suddenly they've got an image in their head.
A grapefruit on steroids. That definitely paints a picture.
Right. You're connecting the new information to something familiar. And that's how our brains learn best. Another powerful way to do this is through analogies.
Like that old saying, it's like comparing apples and oranges.
Well, not quite. More like it's Die Hard but on a bus.
Okay, you've got me there. That's speed. And that analogy really captures the essence of the movie. So we're talking about simplicity, connecting with existing knowledge. What about this unexpectedness thing?
Ah, yes. Unexpectedness. Our brains are wired to predict what's coming next. It's like we have these internal guessing machines. And when something throws those machines off track, we pay attention.
It's like those crazy .com commercials back in the day. Sock puppets singing about pet food, a guy in a gorilla suit breakdancing, weird stuff.
Definitely got your attention, right? But there's a difference between being weird for weird's sake and creating genuine surprise. The book calls it post-dictable surprise. It's unexpected, but then it clicks and you're like, oh, that makes sense now.
So not just random weirdness, but something thought-provoking.
Exactly. Think about those legendary Nordstrom customer service stories, like an employee warming up a customer's car during a snowstorm.
Yeah.
It's unexpected, but it fits perfectly with their reputation for amazing service.
Those stories really make you rethink what good service means. They stick with you. So we've got unexpectedness, but it has to be tied to something meaningful. What's next?
Let's talk about concreteness.
Yeah.
We need to make those ideas tangible, something you can almost grab. Think about Jane Elliott's brown eyes, blue eyes experiment. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yeah, it's a powerful example. She divided her third grade class by eye color to teach them about discrimination.
It sparked a lot of controversy, but it definitely made an impact. By experiencing prejudice firsthand, even in a simulation, those kids learned something that stuck with them.
It's one thing to talk about prejudice, but to actually feel it, even for a day, is completely different.
And that's the point. The more concrete and tangible we can make an idea, the more likely it is to stick.
It reminds me of how math is often taught. In some cultures, they use a lot of concrete examples and visual aids. It helps make those abstract concepts more relatable.
Exactly. It's like that old saying, show, don't tell. When you can create a vivid picture in someone's mind, it's much more powerful. Like that teacher who brought in a cow's eye to teach anatomy.
Okay, that's a little gross, but I get your point. It's about engaging our senses.
Exactly. But even the most brilliant, concrete idea won't go anywhere if people don't believe it. That's where credibility comes in.
Credibility is huge these days, especially with so much information out there. So how do you make your ideas believable?
Sometimes we rely on external sources, like experts or studies. But often, the most powerful kind of credibility comes from within the idea itself.
Okay, so it's not just about who's saying it, it's about what's being said.
Right. It's about the inherent believability of the message. Think about Barry Marshall, the doctor who drank a petri dish of bacteria.
Oh, wow. To prove a point about ulcers, right. That takes guts. Literally.
Talk about putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
It's an extreme example, but it illustrates the power of what the book calls testable credentials.
Like those Will It Blend videos, they're kind of gimmicky, but there's something compelling about watching a blender pulverize an iPhone.
Exactly. It's not always about being dramatic, but about giving people a way to test the idea for themselves. The book talks about the Sinatra test.
If I can make it there, I can make it anywhere.
That's it. It's about finding that one perfect example that proves your point. Imagine pitching a product and saying, this is being used by Google, Apple, and Amazon.
Well, if it's good enough for them.
Right, instant credibility boost. Another aspect of this is the availability bias. We tend to overestimate the likelihood of things that are easy to recall.
Like how we're more afraid of shark attacks than car accidents, even though car accidents are way more common.
Exactly. Because shark attacks are so vivid and memorable, thanks to movies and the media, they feel more dangerous, even if they're statistically less likely.
So how do you use that to make an idea stick? Scare everyone with sharks.
Not quite. But you can challenge people's assumptions. Instead of stating a fact, ask a question. What's more likely to kill you, a shark or a vending machine?
Let me guess, a vending machine.
You got it. It's about engaging people's brains, making them active participants in the learning process. And speaking of engaging, let's move on to emotions.
You know what I find really interesting about this whole success thing? It seems like it can apply to pretty much anything. It's not just about selling products or winning arguments.
You hit the nail on the head. That's what makes Made to Stick so useful.
Mhm.
It's not just for marketers. It's for anyone who wants to communicate more effectively. Teachers, business leaders, even parents trying to get their kids to eat their vegetables.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
I'm all about making learning fun and engaging. What kind of educational goal did you dig up in the book?
Well, they talk about how important it is for teachers to find the core of a lesson and connect it to something students already know. Like, explaining the concept of functions. You know, those equations that can make kids' eyes glaze over.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days. Staring at the textbook like it was written in hieroglyphics.
Right. So instead of just writing an abstract equation on the board, they gave this example of a teacher who brought in crickets. She had the students observe how the crickets' chirping rate changed with the temperature.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool, turning math into a hands-on science experiment.
Exactly. By seeing that relationship between temperature and chirping, the students got a feel for what a function actually does in the real world.
It's like that saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn.
Exactly. The book also talks about the power of asking unexpected questions. Like, instead of just launching into a lecture on air pressure, a physics teacher might start by asking, why do your car tires look a little flat in the winter?
Ooh, that's good. Makes you stop and think. I bet those students were suddenly way more interested in air pressure.
Exactly. It's about sparking their curiosity, making them active learners rather than passive recipients of information. And of course, never underestimate the power of vivid details and good old-fashioned storytelling.
Well, you know what they say? A picture is worth 1,000 words. And a good story, maybe 1,000,000.
Totally. Engaging those emotions is key.
Well,
Like that teacher who brought in a cow's eye to teach lab safety.
Okay, that's a little much. But hey, at least they'll remember to wear their safety goggles.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you know, one of the most fascinating parts of the book, for me at least, was this idea that stories act as flight simulators for our brains.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. Like when you get sucked into a really intense story, you feel like you're right there experiencing it yourself.
Exactly. And the book argues that we learn best from those kinds of immersive experiences. Even if they're just stories, they help us prepare for similar situations in real life.
It's like those after-action reviews they do in the military or those debriefs that firefighters have after a big fire. They're sharing stories, but they're also passing on valuable knowledge.
Absolutely. It's like free tuition for the School of Hard Knocks.
But you know what else is amazing about stories? They bypass our intellectual defenses and connect with us on an emotional level. It's true. Think about how much we learn about history and culture through stories. Myths, legends, fairy tales. They teach us about good and evil, love and loss, all the big stuff.
And they stick with us way longer than a list of facts or rules ever could. That's because they make us feel something.
Like Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Made to Stick, what's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think it's this. Making your ideas stick isn't about being the smartest person in the room or the loudest voice. It's about understanding how people think and using that knowledge to craft messages that resonate and stick with them long after they've heard them.
It's about tapping into those universal principles of human psychology.
Exactly. And anyone can do it. It doesn't matter what you do for a living or how much experience you have.
So the next time you have an idea you want to share, whether it's a business proposal, a lesson plan, or just convincing your friends to watch that new show you love, remember the success framework. Keep it simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and tell a story.
And don't be afraid to have some fun with it. Experiment. See what works. You never know. Your next idea could be the one that changes the world.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Made to Stick.
It's been a pleasure exploring these sticky ideas with you.
The pleasure was all ours. Thanks for listening, everyone. And remember, keep those ideas coming. You never know whose mind you might inspire.